Hello, everyone. Welcome to this Hump Day edition of Sports Shorts Daily, presented by LeBears Casino. Ronnie Rance alongside TK Tommy Chrysan with you. We've got all the logos represented today: Hall of Fame, Rougarou, you name it. We're presented by LeBears. TK's joining us from Court Street Cafe over in Port Allen. Tommy's going to have to get a hall. Change his residency to the west side of Baton Rouge. He goes over there so often these days. Was at the Island Golf Course yesterday. Now back in Port Allen this morning. Before we start,
Wackerman Saturday for Sports Shorts Radio at Fat Daddy's. I mean,
right.
It's kind of I've been on the West Bank a lot.
I want to, before we get into talking, of course, LSU baseball with a giant win last night, getting ready for the weekend, and all the other stuff going on in sports with the fallout still from the NFL draft. A special shout out to the Island Golf Course and to SWAT as well, our presenting sponsor, Terry Abear. They kind of hosted us. We wouldn't have done it without them, so we really appreciate Wesley Construction and Chris Dupree, all of our vendors out there. I know Tremonti's Meat Seafood was out there serving food on a hole, and so we thank everyone that helped make it a huge success. I think it was our third year in a row or fourth year in a row. I'm losing track of the Rougarou Golf Classic, our celebrity event, which Tommy, you saw. We got lots of celebrities that came through there. We had your football stars like the stars of today, the Garrett Nussmeyers and quarterback at LSU, the stars of yesterday, Rohan Davey, played in it. We had the Cajun Ninja, social media cooking fame from Louisiana. We had Coach Matt McMahon, LSU basketball coach. We had Yvette Girard, Dee Bro. Those two are Louisiana Sports Hall of Famers. We, you name it. We had former baseball World Series champions, Will Harris, in the big leagues, and on and on and on. So we appreciate all of them of giving of their time yesterday and to make it a big success. And of course, our sponsors and golfers had an awesome time. TK, the fallout, LSU baseball, by the way, 2 games in a row now offensively. I mean, 12-2, they 10-run rule Tennessee on Sunday. They kept that going against Southeastern, a 15-2 win in 8 innings against the Lions, capped off by a grand slam by Ethan Fry to send everybody home. But good, this is what you want to do, right? I mean, this was the second to last midweek game of the year, really their last test. They'll play Grambling next Tuesday. There'll be no more midweek games, and then LSU at Texas A&M this weekend. And Tommy, this game is A&M's got their backs against the wall. They're 8-13. They really almost need to win this series.
Yeah, I agree completely. So LSU got to carry the momentum from Sunday and last night. And Southeastern does lead the Southland Conference. So, that's a midweek game, but Southeastern, I'm sure they pitched off a little bit. That's my guess. But it's still a very good baseball team with a good coach. But A&M, everybody had them number 1 before the season started. You're going to be in Omaha. And then they went completely out of the polls and started off terribly. Now, they have been a little better the last couple of weekends. And they still got some, a lot of talent on that team. And they're going to be at home. That place can get a little rowdy over there at College Station. So LSU's got to, put their head down. I mean, it's going to be Anderson and then Ianson, and then we'll see what happens Sunday. All 3 games streaming, so you figure out a way to get yourself to watch that. But it's going to be very tough baseball. This is a better A&M team than they were last month. LSU's got to hope they're better now than they were, in spots last month. And hey, it's going to be May baseball. Okay, the month of May is here tomorrow, and it's time for all teams, no matter what conference, Southland, SWAC, Southeastern, Conference USA. It's time to start separating the men from the boys, Sun Belt, the whole bit.
Just to give you an idea how good the SEC is this year, Tommy, Texas A&M is 25-19, 8-13 in the league. Most years you'd be talking about them being bubble for just getting into the tournament. Right now, a lot of the prognosticators and websites that are predicting the field have them as a 2 seed in a regional, not just a 3 or a 4. So that gives you an idea how they're still valued. They're still dangerous. They're still very good. And hey, that old, your back's against the wall, you're going to see what you're made of. So, I think LSU fans that look at this think, hey, that they should go over there. They should sweep A&M. A&M got swept last weekend by Texas. Every single game was a 1-run ball game. I mean, every game. And so it could have easily gone the other way for them. something that did not go the other way is Mississippi State. Lamonis, their head coach who won a national championship in 2021, was fired a couple days ago. That is surprising. College baseball is not necessarily a sport where coaches get fired during the season, but that was the case in Mississippi State. And now that will be most likely the premier job in the offseason that folks will be talking about.
They're going to have a lot of applicants for that job. I'm sure they're going to do their due diligence, but that's one of the top jobs in the country, especially because he won a national title, just a couple of years ago. And I heard some rumblings that, he wasn't a great fit in Starkville and on the campus and all that. He had come from Indiana. It's a different world. But, it's going to be curious to see who gets that job. Somebody. And it could be somebody with a little LSU flavor in their life. We'll wait to see whose name might pop in on that.
The Mississippi State job, the job itself is a legendary job, right? You've got these huge crowds, nice facilities. You're in the best conference. There's a tradition and a history there. Obviously, you can win a natty. It's been done. But you have to live in Starkville, Tommy. I mean, that's the trade-off. So you better pay me a lot of money. I mean, it ain't Oxford. Oxford's not a charming place to live. Columbus, Starkville, oof. So that is the negative. I did have someone ask me yesterday. There's already internet rumor. That's all it is. That Tony Vitello might be interested in it, and I think his agent's definitely going to be interested in it to get him more money. But would Tony Vitello really leave Tennessee, a program where they are even upgrading the stadium as we speak? This next offseason, they're going to revamp the facing of the outside. They're going to add suites, et cetera. Does he think, and I think only he can answer this question, do you want to live in Knoxville? Do you think Tennessee is in a position with an upgraded facility to be in a better spot than to live in Starkville and go to Mississippi State? I mean, that's really only he can answer that question. But regardless of the answer, he will be getting a raise this offseason because he's a guy that it would make sense to look at in another spot because Tennessee's not traditionally the powerhouse program that, and doesn't have the footprint of a stadium to grow even that they do elsewhere. So will be interesting. I remember whenever jobs like Texas open up or LSU opens up, there is a carousel of coaches that either move. If one takes the move, a bunch of others follow, or everybody in the top 5, 6, 7 coaches in America get a raise. And so, regardless, all the other, the Dave Van Horns, the Jay Johnsons of the world, all are happy because everybody's going to get a bump.
Well, if I had to guess, and I'll repeat, a guess, there's a good chance they get an assistant from one of the other 15 schools in the SEC. Who, I don't know, pure guessing, but we've seen that a lot where, an assistant coach for a SEC team ends up with a head coach. Look at Wes Johnson's at Georgia now. Was 1 year at LSU after being in the major leagues. I mean, so I wouldn't be surprised to see that. But other than that, I don't know what their next step would be. I'd be surprised if Tony Vitello went to Starkville. I'm not saying that, it would be the biggest surprise in the world, but I think I'd go, didn't see that one coming.
I'm going to just take a flyer here and say Mingione from Kentucky. That's what that's going to be. He was an assistant there under Cohen. That Cohen's not there. He's the AD at Auburn. But I'm going to say it makes sense for the Kentucky head coach to take the Mississippi State job, especially if you've already been there.
I like that thought. And look, Mingione's got, utmost respect. When you talk to David DeLucci and Todd Walker, these guys that are in Hoover for a week. David and I had a conversation about Mingione a couple months ago. Just that, hey, he's a real guy. Aside from being a heck of a coach, a heck of a guy, family guy, all this stuff. I could definitely see he going to Starkville. I'm not so sure Vitello would.
TK, we got some news with the New Orleans Saints. The draft was sort of ho-hum. I think people were looking for the Shedeur Sanders or a star factor. It didn't happen, but they filled out their roster, right? I mean, they did that. They're trying to do it on the cheap, and they might do that. Who knows?
Well, they had 9 picks, and they took all 9 picks. 9 different positions, by the way. And I read a caption at Crescent City Sports where Mickey Loomis said, there were a lot of phone calls of possible trades, trade up, trade down, but they never found one that they thought was enough value or one to, pull the trigger and say, hey, let's do it. So 9 draft choices, 9 different positions on the field. And the only thing that really happened was taking Tyler Shuck. They had signed Ben DiNucci. I don't even know if people knew they signed him. They got rid of him because one more less chair they need to carry into the quarterback room meeting. So, but other than that, it's going to be what happens next for the New Orleans Saints. I guess we'll have the OTAs and all that stuff in May. And, before we know it, the NFL season will be upon us. Hey, don't forget about Court Street Cafe here in Port Allen. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, steak night on Saturday. Court Street Cafe. Check them out. Jason and the staff do a great job. Connect on Facebook and Instagram. Keep up with the lunch specials, the dinner specials, the dinner of the week special. Friday night crawfish, sometimes Saturday night steak. All that stuff here at Court Street Cafe in Port Allen. Do check them out when you have a chance. You'll be glad you did.
The New Orleans Saints draft, Tommy, I don't know. It's the only thing I agree with Mickey Loomis on at this point is you can't judge a draft until about 3 or 4 years from now, and I think that's really the case.
We'll see some big tackles on the field in September.
Right. I mean, we're going to, and look, and what is a draft normally? A draft is, the top 3 round picks, the top 3 picks in your organization, what do they end up doing? Do you get value out of them? Do they play? If you traded up, was it worth the trade up for anybody? We'll see what that's all about, TK.
Yeah, it's going to be, Saints fans are eager to see what's going to happen there. And, tough being a fan of New Orleans right now. Well, the Saints is just this kind of like a foggy picture. And, of course, the Pelicans hired Dumars, and they haven't done anything publicly yet or made any big announcements. So sports fans in New Orleans, with interesting couple months coming up.
Joe Dumars with some interesting decisions with the Pelicans. That do they keep Willie Green as a coach? Do they move him into another role in the organization? That's being bantered about, that it's not a lock that he'll be the coach. So, optimistic that Joe Dumars can be maybe that grandfatherly figure to Zion Williamson, to see if he can somehow reach the young man and motivate him to care more than he does, to take care of himself more than he does. And they're contemplating making a change with their head coach. So, in trust with Dumars, we will. I mean, that's all you can do is just sit back and hope that he pushes the buttons and it works out like it did in Detroit the first 10 years he was running the show, and not the last 10 years he was running the show. The rest of the draft, from a standpoint of, I guess, what other teams did that. Was there one team out there, Tommy, that in your opinion won the draft or really helped themselves, in your opinion, that definitely improved themselves in the draft?
I saw some of the people that give out the draft grades, and there was nobody like really separated themselves. A couple of teams supposedly addressed needs, but there's a reason teams are drafted early in the drafts, because they weren't in great shape. They didn't have a good winning record, obviously, or had a losing record. So, I think the old thing is, in 2 or 3 years you'll really know. But no one team jumps out at me as really saying, boy, they really made themselves better in the draft up in Green Bay. So, Saints fans, NFL fans, find out soon.
Will Campbell going to New England. So far, he's won the press conferences. After the draft. I mean, everything you've read about him, everything that's been put out about him. I can't wait to kind of hopefully he'll one day be playing in the Rougarou Golf Classic or the Hall of Fame Celebrity Golf Classic. He'll definitely be a Hall of Famer, I would think, on the trajectory of his career one day. And I don't know if I'll still be around, but it'll be then. But he has said all the right things, done all the right things up there in New England. And I think he is going to be a fan favorite very quickly. Talking about a guy who is self-deprecating, a guy who enjoyed having made fun of himself with the short arms a little bit, and a guy who has really, always repping Louisiana. And I thought one of the funniest answers he gave at the press conference when they introduced him in New England was, it gets really cold up here. What are you going to do? Well, if it gets too cold, I'll buy a jacket. And he talked about how he goes hunting and he's always cold in the woods and he's used to it. Speaking of New England, did you see online Bill Belichick did an interview, and he had on this T-shirt with holes in it, which I don't know. Is he trying to be hip to relate to the kids? I guess since he's dating a 25-year-old, maybe I don't know what's going on with Bill, but he just came out with a book. He's coming out with a book, and there's his life in football. And there's no reference to Robert Kraft, the owner of New England. And then when point blank asked, why or how, he's like, oh, well, it was just things that resonated to me in my life. And then the reporter asked him if he, with the decision to be fired. He said, no, I wasn't fired. It was a mutual decision. So, well, Robert Kraft said you were fired. He said, no, it was a mutual decision. So I don't know what's going on with old Bill. I would have thought going to college, dating a young girl, maybe it would have cleared up the cobwebs a little bit, but he seems still bitter and kind of trying to rewrite history a little bit.
Well, what also was very strange and odd, the girlfriend was being interviewed with him with CBS. And I think is a very fair question. They said, how did y'all meet? To Bill and to her. And she got mad. She got pissed. She got up and walked out of the room. Okay, now I think it's a fair question to ask a 70-something-year-old, how'd you meet a 25-year-old and a profile 70-something-year-old like Bill Belichick, arguably the greatest NFL coach ever. And she got pissed, and then CBS had to wait, and then they had to redo. And I mean, it was, but again, I think that's a fair question, in my opinion. And then apparently she didn't like it at all, and he never did answer it.
By the way, Tommy, that's a standard question any human being, I would say, most human beings ask your friends or anybody. How'd y'all meet? Oh, we met online. We met at a bar. We met at a game. We met,
mutual friend. Right. That's the canned answer. That mutual friend introduced us, and then that's the end of it. Okay, because so now they didn't put an end to that question, even though she walked off the set and CBS he didn't answer it. It's going to come up again somewhere, somehow. It's going to come up again. Whereas if they could have just answered it, then maybe then it goes away.
Well, unless the answer is sugardaddy.com, then it makes it worse, I guess.
Well, there could be a lot of bad answers, I guess, but I'm not going to speculate. But Carl says a lot of rumors going around, but rumors are just that. But I did think it was a fair question. But what do I know?
Saw Carl the cat, by the way, at the 15-2 Southeastern win. By the way, it only took 34 years, but this was payback last night for the Lions beating LSU 15-2 in 1991 when we played a midweek. And so
they had a pretty good team back then.
Yeah, LSU
they had some dudes.
LSU's now winning won 32 of its last 34 against Southeastern. So, but I happen to be a part of one of those two that did not go the Tigers' way.
Well, as a player, I didn't pitch any of the game, but I'm 2-0 against LSU. We swept them. They were 12-0 or 10-0 early in the season, ranked. And they came to Hammond, and we swept them in 2 7-inning games, and they refused to play us anymore. And then LSU, and so my next 3 years, we never played against LSU, home or away. And then I think shortly after that, they began playing again. But they didn't have a good day in Hammond back in '79.
Yeah, that was Jack LeMabe was the head coach.
Yes,
at LSU back then,
and Brent McClure, not Trey or Todd or Tanner. Brent McClure hit a grand slam to win the first game of that doubleheader. A big, I think it was like 4-3 or 5-4, and he hit the grand slam that blew it open. And then we cruised, and then we rolled in the second game. We beat him by 10 runs in the second game.
Nice,
but they weren't the LSU that we know now. Right. Back then, UNO and Tulane were the premier programs in Louisiana by far.
Yeah, that was pre-Skip Bourbon. All right, tell us about Court Street Cafe before we get out of here.
Well, they got the lunch specials, the dinner specials. It's easy to get to here at Court Street Cafe in Port Allen. Jason and the staff do a good job. Follow them on Facebook and Instagram. Keep up with all those specials and drink specials and crawfish on a Friday at 5 o'clock when they roll that out. You can find it all on social media. Just a couple of minutes over the Mississippi River Bridge in Port Allen, Court Street Cafe. Normally we're here on a Monday. We had to move it around this week. We're here on a Wednesday. We'll be back next Monday for more of that. Friday, more Sports Shorts Daily. I'll be at Tremonti's Meat and Seafood in Baton Rouge. I'll get Sports Shorts Radio Saturday morning, Baton Rouge, Lafayette, Lake Charles on ESPN Radio. On behalf of Ronnie Rance, I'm Tommy Christ, Sam. Have a great day, everyone.